There's this idea out there right now called vasocomputation.
Right.
The core hypothesis: a sustained thought is a pattern of vascular clenching. The thought persists until the muscle relaxes. Humans develop the ability to freeze sensations, then use those frozen pieces to construct a grammar for thought. So basically, this person is arguing that your vascular and muscular system's way of clenching literally contains some of the thinking that we do.
Yeah, well, it's beyond what we understand. And we very much do experience the world with our bodies. There is a lot of research and belief behind how so much of it is in your brain. And I don't debate that, but there's more of it throughout your vascular system, your nervous system, how it reacts to stuff. The brain's the processing center, but a lot of it is reactive throughout your whole body.
And if your brain is making sense of it, then the various way that your muscles are tense or your body is tense is part of what your brain is going to be making sense of. That's going to affect your perceptions. I kind of thought of it because you were mentioning how when people have a release, they have an openness in their mind to something, which would be predicted by this theory that like the actual state of your muscular tension will change your conscious experience and then perhaps like lead to plasticity.
A lot of it does come down to blood flow. It's interesting if you look at the anatomy of your nervous system and your vascular system. If you ever went to those like Body Worlds things where they've dissected everything, you see it looks a lot like a tree with no leaves on it. It's all these like branches into a smaller branch, into a smaller branch, into a smaller branch, and it gets
like a fractal.
Yeah. The nervous system is important because it wires everything together. But if you cut off a nerve or leave a nerve, you'll lose some sensation to something, but that organ or muscle it goes to usually will still survive in some capacity. But if you cut the blood flow off to it, it dies. So the blood flow and nerve flow are both important. But if you cut the blood flow kind of drives the ship to it. When you do get a release of something, you do usually improve the blood and nerve flow to an area. And you see it in people's arms all the time, actually. All of the blood and nerve flow to both your arms comes right through the little area under your collarbone right here. It's called your thoracic outlet. There's your heart's in the center of your chest. There's a big artery called your subclavian artery. It goes under your collarbone, down through the little area under your pec, and then it does all the blood flow to your arms. And the same little space, the nerves that come from the middle lower part of your neck come right down through that same area. And it's an area where people hold a lot of tension. And like if you're really stressed or anxious, a lot of times you'll kind of guard and brace and almost go in a bit of a fetal position and into your chest. A lot of that tension, partly from stress and anxiety, partly from sitting at desks all day, you get tight through there. And then your elbow can start getting sore. You can start getting numbness for things in your fingers. And people will very quickly think they get any weird tingling in their hands, sort of.
Oh, yeah. This happened to me.
Yeah. People will like, oh, it's a carpal tunnel. Everybody's heard of their carpal tunnel. And then like, okay, we got to go in and cut open your carpal tunnel. But most of the time you go up the chain a little bit and it's around the fronts of just under your collarbone area. And if you do like needling stuff like I do with people, you can loosen that tension and almost reflexively and immediately people can feel like, oh, I get this it's like my arms can breathe. You get this clampy pressure off of it because you are getting like a vasodilation and a bit more better nerve flow coming down to it.
That's crazy. If you're not getting needling or whatever, like you're at home, because I'm like, yeah, that's me, man. My hands get numb from doing this for hours. What should I do? Like, what's the opposite of this motion, I guess is maybe what I'm asking. I don't know.
I'd say step one is understanding that you're doing it and realizing where you hold tension and kind of where, and add a bit of the important anatomy to it. And then usually breathing exercises help, getting up and moving around more, reaching up. Like we don't reach up enough in life. We kind of, when you're kids, you're doing monkey bars, you're doing somersaults, you're rolling around all over the place. When you get older, you don't do somersaults and cartwheels and wrestle and stuff. And so you got to artificially get up and move around a whole bunch more.
That's definitely true. I now just like take that agitation in my body as a stop signal rather than like what can I do to fix this? I'm like, what should I not do for a bit that is causing this, to remove that?
Yeah. It's partially understood and like at a basic wiring and basic kind of plumbing perspective with your vascular system and nervous system, but it's more affected by emotion than is completely understood. And your tissues, they call like your issues in your tissues kind of thing. Your body will hold stuff and it does reflexively relax. And then, yeah, you do create like a mental map for that in your brain.
Yeah. And it also philosophically, it just shows you that the assumption that the brain is the seat of consciousness, as they like to say, is an assumption. And that's a kind of artificial, like it's not the electricity in your computer that makes the computer. It's the electricity plus all the other parts. I don't know if that analogy exactly works. Like, for example, if you're like an emotion causes a lot of your psychology, a lot of that is endocrine, hormonal. And it just makes me think that our, not even our conscious experience, let's say what we see as the mind experience could be like a lot more distributed than people think. There was a study where husbands and wives would work together on a puzzle and they weren't allowed to talk, but they would subconsciously specialize in the things they knew they were the best at in the task, like there were questions to answer. And so they would outperform other pairs of silent people who didn't mind meld. And so I think it's neat to think about that idea too, that like if consciousness can be extended outside the brain network, perhaps there are ways it can even be extended like between people in a shared conscious moment.
We are affected by the energy of the people around us, and I think we have mirror neurons in us. Yeah, there is a lot of subconscious sort of non-direct things that you are very much impacted by the people around you.
And the fact that it doesn't come out in like linear logical content in our mind makes it harder for us to believe that it's real or scientific. But it's really just an emergence property of science.
I was listening to, I think his name's David Eagleman, I think it is.
He's interesting.
A neuroscientist guy. He was on the Tetragrammaton podcast recently. Like he's more of a, believes things are more from the brain. And his sort of standpoint was like, well, you can have a heart transplant and you're still fundamentally the same person, but you lose a chunk of your brain and you can be a very different person, which it's hard to argue with that.
Isn't there like crazy stories? I'm probably bullshitting, but like there's crazy stories where people like have a sense of something from the person's life or their personality is like legitimately changed by the change of an organ.
Yeah, I think it's probably true. It's also going through a major organ transplant is also probably going to give you a little bit more of a sense of vulnerability and change who you are as a person.
I guess so. Okay, but I'm going to ask Perplexity. Hold on. Are there crazy and true stories of people getting a heart transplant and then spooky stuff? Okay, this sounds like a lot. A health-conscious dancer developed a sudden craving for KFC nuggets after her transplant. Interestingly, uneaten chicken nuggets were found in the jacket of her young male donor when he died.
Well, that proves it.
Yeah, it's pretty much true. Yeah, okay, this looks a bit sketchy. A 7-month-old boy received a heart from a 16-month-old donor and then exhibited behaviors reminiscent of the donor, including similar baby talk words and cuddling in the same way. So that's a no.
I worked with a guy right after he got out of the ICU for having a double lung transplant. It was interesting. And he had cystic fibrosis and had his lungs transplanted. And it was really interesting because your lungs fill up all the way from like just above your collarbones, wrap around your heart, and go all the way down to the bottom of your ribcage. They're bigger than you think.
Yeah.
And they're little bags that they have an elasticity to them that can kind of contract and expand. And I don't know exactly transplant stuff in terms of, I imagine they try to find someone comparable size to give you lungs of, because, but this guy, he could breathe, but he was in the ICU for a while. For a while afterwards, his big complaint was he couldn't use his shoulders. Like he couldn't lift his arms above his head. It was like he was stuck. And he was so tight inside him and pulling that we had to just work with him and slowly try to get him to do breathing exercises, move his trunk. And
do you think it was that it wasn't like expanding up? the lungs were not like filling the cavity correctly, or?
Oh, it was like a big wad of tension inside him, just like pulling him down into that fetal position. And your lungs pull on your shoulders more than you think, as does a tension around your liver. Like there's this fascial connection stuff inside you. But it's just really interesting when surgeons can go in and just cut stuff out or replace things and see what actually happens to you.
I wonder, like, as we get more bionic, like they're working on a straight up heart that's like a bionic one, which weirdly also has like steady pulse flow. It doesn't give you a pulse, which seems like a terrible idea.
Yeah, you're just dead. You
Yeah,
have flow going through.
it's just weird. And also, it's like messing with a core variable when you don't know what that's going to do. It just seems sketchy. But it's interesting to think of in the future, you'll be like, yeah, can I get a personality transplant with my heart transplant too? Like, could you put the things in that are going to make me feel warmer towards other people? Or I don't know.
Yeah. Well, they can get that more probably figuring out with probes and ultrasound things to just zap your brain and try to tweak your personality until you land somewhere where you like.
No, I'm still an asshole, unfortunately. Can you dial it up a little higher?
What could possibly go wrong?
I know. That's one I really want to try. I don't know if you've heard of it, TMS, where you like zap your brain and it temporarily like stops a few neurons.
What part of you really wants to try that? What would you
People have crazy experiences and I want to experience them. Like there's one where you zap the parietal lobe and then you feel that God is in the room. Like, crazy shit. And I've just heard it's like a new form of biofeedback. In fact, I have a student who did it for like a year and she reported that it was great. But my gut feeling is like just randomly zapping brain neurons. We're going to need 20 years of data before I really want to try that.
Yeah, it's not one like to be an early adopter on, I don't think. There was another, it might have been Tim Ferriss's podcast, but I think he talked to the first guy that did like the Neuralink thing with Elon Musk.
I want that all the time. I want to be able to just like think into my phone the query. Like when I'm typing the query on my phone, I'm so mad at the phone, my thumbs, and the like output delay from me in my brain, and then
so you have too many thoughts in there. You'll have like a 3-word output hole of your mouth where you have a 10 output brain.
It's interesting to think about at the extreme when your output is genuinely incredibly delayed, or somebody who's nonverbal. Right now, they have to go mind to hand to a pictograph device or some kind of writing device. So they have to really break all their thinking down in like little chunks, which might be hard. Whereas I do think one day it's just going to understand your communicative intent and give us that. And that's going to make it so much more interesting to talk to people like that and enrich their consciousness.
There's a Black Mirror episode where they can implant a chip in you and where you actually have recordings of what happened. Memory is a funny thing. Like what you actually remember is not necessarily actually what happened. So having an actual reference to exactly what happened can mess with your brain and
break your narratives.
In good and bad ways.
There's studies on flashbulb memories where it's like, what were you doing the morning of September 11th or when the Challenger exploded or something like that? And people have these super visceral memories. And then in this study, they showed that a lot of them were not accurate. It's like, no, you didn't live in that part of this country when they actually go and fact check it.
Yeah, I see that with my daughter. Like, recently we were talking about because we moved houses 7 years ago and ask her what she remembers from the old house. And you see the stories that she tells are based partly on the pictures that we have around and some of the stories that we've told as opposed to actually her remembering it. It's just that's how the memory is in her brain.
Yeah, that's neat. And every time you like take the memory out and put it back in, that's a plastic moment where you can restore the memory in a different way, which is great if you're traumatized and you need to like fuck with the memory. That's a technique in trauma therapy, is to twist the memory in the story so that you have some level of control or some level of bizarreness, something that changes the sinister element. But it also goes to show you that the more you dial in your stories over time in a way, like the less real they become as they become the stereotyped thing in your memory that you keep saying.
Yeah. It's where people that do have more ADHD or just anxiety and just have a hard time being in the moment, they think about a story, and every little time they think about it, they change it a little bit and find another way to worry about it a little bit. And then
Yeah.
that ends up becoming the tensions that they hold in their body. And that's a big part
That's,
of what then turns into the persistent pains, or back pain or hip pain or groin pain, or like clenching their jaw.
that's interesting. So you have an experience, and then each time you think about it, you think about other elements of the experience you could be worrying about, until that becomes like overwhelming to some part of your body copes and tenses up to respond.
Yeah. You see it very much a lot with quite anxious people, that if the area of discomfort in their body has been their fixation point, and I have the capacity to make that feel better, you see them start searching out for something else to be anxious about. So their brain's always looking for something to worry about. And you have to be careful of chasing symptoms of like, okay, well, I can make that feel better. You're just putting out little bushfires with a little garden hose. So you can do that to help them to trust you, that you like, oh, this guy's pretty good. But like, that can just be the perpetual cycle where they just need you. They're dependent on you to make things calm. They have to try to then teach them like, okay, your hamster wheel of your brain is part of what's creating this.
That's so interesting, because I'm learning about how people use other people, usually kind of pathological, as objects to help them regulate their own experience of life. So if somebody's having an like anxious, almost OCD fixation on some pain and you relieve it, that whole cycle was reinforcing, going to you, getting the pain relief. So now by finding another pain, their body's going to get the relief again and get that cycle where the other, who is actually an object in that case, they're like not really thinking of you as a person. I mean, not specifically, but like in this theory, they're thinking of you as the pain regulator. And so they're going to come and bring pain. And somehow you and I have to reframe that to like, you are the pain regulator. I am the person who shows you how to regulate the pain or how to regulate the problem.
Totally. That's kind of what I end up doing all day. And I've learned to earlier on in the process to try to push the ownership of that back and call people on that to see it. And some people are accepting of that and some people aren't. And some people just end up professionally going to appointments, just trying to have other people try to find or solve their problems.
And searching for the solution. But maybe what they're really searching for is that other object who can make them feel like they're going to find the solution, which is an ironic way of not ever finding it, because you're depending on someone else to magic wand it to you.
Yeah, it becomes part of your identity.
Makes me think of learned helplessness, like when people don't feel that they have any levers that they can move, then they will do helplessness and they'll like perform helplessness even to be like, come help me. And so like a big part of it is helping a person see that they have some level of agency. And even that might just be like tuning into what you feel and where you feel it. But thinking it's not that I'm helpless and need someone else, but I can try something and get a response from that and continue to regulate is actually super empowering and starts to help a person believe that they don't need the magic person. They just need themselves. I had a student who he would get so stressed about what he was doing and so worried he was doing it wrong. And he'd be like, I got to ask Matt. I got to wait till Matt. I'm not going to work on it. I'm going to wait till my session with Matt. And then I would walk in the room and he would go, oh, I know what to do. I didn't say anything. It was just the fact that I came in and I like triggered in him the part of him that knows what to do. And then he knew what to do.
I see that in physio too, particularly people that I've worked with for a while. It can take a while to get in to see me sometimes now, and they'll have this problem and it's been bothering them for weeks, and they get an appointment with me and then they come in that day and like, it's weird. It's feeling better today, because they know that I have the capacity to help them. But even before I've done anything to them, they're like, oh, I'm feeling better.
That's fascinating.
So giving people agency where they feel like they can do, like they have something to do, is important. But also some people just feel a compulsion to do, and sometimes not doing anything and just actually waiting and giving it a bit of time and trying to not neurotically look for different things that are wrong. Sometimes the time solves a lot of problems.
And not doing things is a form of doing things. In fact, my favorite philosopher, Dan Dennett, when he talks about free will in human beings, he's like, most of free will in human beings is not doing something you automatically would do. Like, we think of free will as agency through action, but he's arguing that free will is my body is pushing me towards X, but I don't. And that's an important form of agency. So
yeah, consciously choosing not to.
Yeah.
Like, and again, I end up more and more, maybe it's partly people referring people to me, and partly more people are getting just ADHD and anxiety kind of thing. But I work with a lot of them, and there's you get uncomfortable if you're just constantly bouncing from one place to another place to another place, and you can't kind of find it. It chicken or the egg, but it in itself is inherently anxiety. Like, it's not restful. So choosing to like, nope, I'm not going to do that, and choose just sit in a chair and have a coffee for a little bit. That's therapeutic.
You've been listening to Why Things Hurt and How We Learn with your hosts, Brent Stevenson and Matt Giammarino. Why Things Hurt and How We Learn is brought to you by Envision Physiotherapy, Work with Matt, whythingshurt.com, and Remix Your Education. If you enjoyed the podcast, leave a review at Apple Music, Spotify, or on your favorite podcast app.